English language is a difficult GCSE. So today we're going to be looking at a few tips and tricks in how you can get better at English language and how you can improve your essay writing and answering the questions more efficiently so you can manage your time better. Because for me, I find a massive problem with time in the English language papers. I just feel like they don't give enough time compared to how much they ask us to write. That's exactly what I'm going to be helping you guys with this video. I made an English literature video a while back, so if you want to see that, make sure you click the card in the top right. And without further ado, let's get on with the video. English language papers are very long, and sometimes you just don't have the motivation to actually sit through all of them and practice them. So I think it's a much better idea, especially when you're starting out, to actually split the questions up and do them on separate days. So you can do question 1 on one day, question 2 on another day, question 3 on another day, question 4 on another day, and then question 5 you can completely ignore for a bit. So you can go with your questions 1 to 4 and then continue on with question 5 at another day. So if you do, for example, question 3 on Monday and then question 4 on Wednesday, just give yourself that break between them and you will find that it's much easier to actually get yourself to do the tasks that you want to do, and also that way you can really get better specifically at the questions that you're struggling with. So for example, in paper 1, if you're doing AQA like me, I personally find question 3 the most difficult question. It makes no sense at all. It is the structure question that asks us to how like the structure can interest the reader, and it makes no sense to me at all. So what you can do is to write all the questions, so question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for both papers, and just order them in where you think you do best in all of them. So for example, you might think, oh, you're really good at creative writing, you can put that near the top, and you could also say that, oh, question 2 for paper 2 is quite difficult for me, so I'm going to put that near the bottom. And then what you can try and do is all the questions near the bottom of your list, try and practice as much as you can, and then make sure you give those papers to your teachers to mark. Because if you do a question and you just leave it and be like, okay, that looks good, I'm probably going to get a high mark for that, it's not really going to help you. Just like how in maths, when you do a question, you have to see if it's right or wrong. In English, if you do an essay question, you have to make sure you check it with the teacher, because it's really difficult to look at the mark scheme yourself and try and make an estimate of what you got. So it's best to either give it to a friend if you're desperate, but most of the time try and give it to a teacher and actually let them mark it for you, because they're the best at giving you feedback. And if you're in year 11 like me, they will prioritize you, especially when we have our GCSEs coming up soon. Like now, we have only a few months left, so really get those questions done and give them to your teacher. So even if you do just one question per week, that is more than enough, because as long as you're seeing some sort of an improvement, then you're getting better. It's really important when you're starting out to make sure you don't worry about timing too much and try and focus on your accuracy at first. When you get better at your accuracy and you start writing really good paragraphs and you get really good marks for them, then you can start trying to push it down into the set amount of time. In the, I think, AQA website at least, there is like a recommended time that they give you for all of the questions. So if you want, you can give yourself the set amount of time to do each question and try and see if you can write the same amount of writing in that set amount of time. And also try and make sure that you spend that time planning as well. Don't plan beforehand and then when you start writing, that's when you start the clock. Try and make sure your planning is included within the time, so that way you're really pushing yourself and you're more likely to do better in the exams, because you're already used to that time stress and therefore it won't be as much of a problem with you. One really difficult thing is to, when you get your question back that was marked and you see that you didn't do as well as you thought, to actually get better from that. And one way that I found is really useful for me at least is to have a set structure for all of your questions and try and do everything in a specific order, because that way everything feels really similar and I feel much more comfortable with answering the questions rather than just freestyling and doing whatever I want, because that way I can easily get lost and then get confused on what I'm writing about. So for me, what I like to do is, depending on the question, I have a specific amount of paragraphs I normally write and a specific structure to how I write those paragraphs, and that way I find it more useful. If you guys want to know how I do that, just stick around. I will explain all the questions in a bit more depth till the end of the video. So basically what I like to do is have a specific order as well. So for example, I don't really like starting off with question 1 and then going all the way to 5. I start off with the creative writing at first, and then I move my way backwards. Question 4 for me is probably one of my strongest, and then I move to question 3, question 2, then question 1. I normally like to skip question 3 and leave it till the end because I find it so difficult that I spend way too long on it. So that's probably my weakest point and where I'm going to have to improve on. But the thing is, what you have to try and do is just follow some sort of structure, whether it's a structure you find online or a structure that's given to you by your teacher. Just make sure you have some sort of idea on what you're doing, and then apply that structure again and again and again to many of your writings and see if it works. If it doesn't work, find something else and just continue doing the same thing until you find something that gives you high marks and you can do in a short amount of time. And that is the perfect thing that you want. When you find that, it can be different for different people. It doesn't have to be the same as your friend, for example, but when you find a specific way that you can answer the questions and it makes sense to you, use that way and make sure you utilize it the best you can, because that's the best way you can get the most marks in English language GCSE. Now we went over a few brief tips. I want to actually go over paper 1 and paper 2 in a bit more depth. So if you didn't know already, I do a QA for English language GCSE, and so I don't know if it's the same with other exam boards, but the way it works is you have a non-fiction paper and a fiction paper for a QA. For the paper 1, it's fiction. You get 1 text, and question 1 is just simply stating 4 things, and I think the easiest way to do this is just to quote directly from the text and make sure that what you're saying matches what questions are asking you to do, and then you can literally guarantee your 4 marks every single time. Now question 2, by the way, if you look, I've got a mind map that I made back in year 10. If you want me to send you a copy of this, just email me. My email is in the description. If you have any other sort of help or anything you need, I am perfectly free in that. Any sort of, like, if you want to ask something, you can just drop an email to me. I will probably respond to you as quickly as I can. Anyways, let's go back to question 2. Question 2 is language. So obviously try and learn as many language features as you can. So your similes, metaphors, all of that stuff. You can watch like Mr. Bruff videos to really help you. Mr. Bruff is great. And basically what I like to do for this is do 3 paragraphs, sometimes 4, but mainly 3, and I try and pick out a quotation for each of the paragraphs that satisfies what the question is asking me to do. And I make sure that all the quotations are slightly different, so I can talk about slightly different things. I make sure that they all have like a simile or metaphor or something, but I also try and make sure that I'm not repeating myself and I'm talking about a different thing each time, if that makes sense. I also like to, because it's really like you would really expect to use the same sort of adjectives again and again. So what I like to do is to have like a few bullet points of different adjectives that I could use, and then therefore my work won't sound as repetitive because I'm not using the same boring adjectives again and again and again. Question 3 is the structure, and you might already know that I do not like this question. It is genuinely atrocious. I just don't understand what it wants you to do. But I think the best tips I have for you guys is to learn your structure terminology firstly, because it's just important to know what sort of things there are for structure. Don't use metaphors and similes and things because it won't work, and just try and find things that you can talk about, because it's really weird because you can't really find something that interests the reader. Don't try and use phrases like this interests the reader or it makes the reader want to read on, because they just sound quite cringy and they don't really give that effect you want on the examiner, and they probably won't like it. Question 4 on the other hand makes a lot of sense to me, and I can do really well on this question because it's just quite straightforward for me. What I like to do is I get 4 quotations from any part of the text, and I make sure that those quotations all agree with the statement, because it's just much easier to agree than disagree, but it would depend sometimes. But I try and make sure that I find 4 quotations that agree with the statement, and then I make sure that they're slightly different as well, so I can talk about slightly different things each time. and it's really important to have a lot of different useful phrases. I might link a few down below, and also try and link it back to the reader as well. Not only talk about what you're how it's agreeing and stuff, try and talk about the effect it gives on the reader. That can also give you a few more marks, which could be the very reason that you transition from an 8 to a 9, or from a 7 to an 8, or 6 to a 7, or whatever. So it's really important to make an emphasis on everything. So yeah, that is the part A of paper 1. Part B is the creative writing, the question 5, and I don't mind this question. It's not too bad, but my best advice for it would be to learn as much good vocabulary as you can. Firstly, the best way I found doing this was to just read other people's work and see how they use vocabulary, because reading at this stage isn't going to help. If you start reading now expecting that you're going to know a whole thesaurus by the time you get to GCSEs, it's not going to happen, because if you're reading just for memorizing good vocabulary, it's not going to work. It's much more efficient to just read other people's creative writings who've already done really well and just see how they've used words and things. I personally prefer the description compared to the actual story writing, not because it's more fun. I would much rather write a story, but I feel like it's easier to get more marks for the description because you're not focusing on the story as much, because the examiners don't care about your story. They don't care if it's an appealing story. They just care about how well the content is laid out and how many different techniques that you can use in your writing. So it's much easier to do that with a description because I can have a set structure, and I personally like set structures and organization and everything like that, rather than just going all over the place and not knowing what I'm doing. So yeah, that's basically what I do. I also try and make better words than, for example, for colors, I don't use blue and green and yellow. I try and find other words, so I'll link a few down in the description as well, because it just makes it sound much better. So for example, amethyst or ruby, instead of saying something's red, you can say it's like a ruby, sort of like, you know what I mean. But the point is, that is paper 1. It shouldn't be too bad. If you have any questions, make sure you email me. Now let's move on to paper 2, which I personally find much easier than paper 1 for some reason. If you guys disagree with me or agree with me, make sure you write it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now let's move on to question 1. Question 1 is a multiple choice. It shouldn't be too hard. You're just basically picking out what's true. If you have any problems with that, you can leave a comment down below, because it shouldn't be too hard. Question 2 is probably one of my favorite questions to ever exist, because I can guarantee myself 8 out of 8 every single time. I've got a set structure in how to do the second question that I basically get 8 out of 8 every single time. So question 2 always asks you to compare both of the sources about a specific thing. So over here I have one about ghosts, and both the sources talk about ghosts in slightly different ways, and I have to just compare the different strange things that happen. And what you need to do is write just 2 paragraphs. That's it. 2 slightly chunky paragraphs, but the first paragraph should have your first point. So the first point should be about the source A, a point about that, and give some evidence about that source, and then you have to give a reason. This is a thing that a lot of people forget about. You have to give a reason to why this might have been like in the time period that it was in. So for example, it's mainly the time period. You can always talk about time period because they always have different, and both the sources are normally at different times, so you can always describe the differences to be a cause of the time period. So I'll give you an example here. This question 2 I got 8 out of 8 for. So in both sources A and B, different strange things happen, and the reactions to these strange things differ. For example, in source A there are objects moving due to a bowl of oranges rising unaided off a sideboard, and the reaction to this event, it is clear that we are more advanced because we have more scientific evidence, so we are less likely to believe this was caused by ghosts. So you can see that I not only described something that happened in source A, I described why it could have happened. So they didn't believe it was ghosts because it might have been due to the scientific evidence we have nowadays and stuff like that. And then I also went on to describe source B and how back then there wasn't as much science and scientific advancements, and therefore they were more superstitious and believed in things like that. And then for the second paragraph I talked about a different thing and a different reason for that. Moving on to question 3, which for paper 2, I believe is, I can't even remember, let me just double check. This is a very similar question to question 2 in paper 1, because you, instead of having 8 marks, so you have 12 marks. So it's a very similar structure, you're just writing slightly more, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's basically it. There's literally nothing else to talk about for that. And then question 4, if I get my book again. Oh, it's just like a comparing question generally about the whole text. So this question is kind of difficult for me. I don't like it the most, but what you have to try and do is give both writers' attitudes to whatever it is, and you have to, so what I like to do is give 3 bullet points for each person, and I try and dedicate each paragraph to one of the bullet points, and I try and find a quotation that supports the bullet point, and then I can just build on that like that, and that's literally it. Question 5 is a non-fiction writing, so you can get asked, I think, a leaflet, essay, article, or letter, I think. And I feel like for this question, try and focus as much on being persuasive or whatever it is. So most of the time it's about persuasion, but sometimes it can be about different things. But you're trying to make sure you're getting your view across as much as possible, if that makes sense. And you're trying to do it in the most over-the-top way as possible as well. That's what our teacher told us, because it just really helps in being persuasive. Alliteration, rhetorical questions, direct address, exaggeration at times, it's really important. Also try and add in a few fake statistics. It actually really supports what you're saying. Don't make them too fake though. Oh yeah guys, a lot of you haven't subscribed, even though you guys are watching my videos. If you find these videos useful, make sure you subscribe, because it really means a lot to me, and it just means that you can get my videos as soon as possible and you benefit more from it. You can always unsubscribe at any time, but I'll see you again next time. Bye.